Welcome back to 49er Forecast. Larry Krueger with you today on The Sports Leader down here in our studio at Levi's before I head out to 49er practice, Niners practice at 11. And, of course, at 11 o'clock, that's where we're walking you up to. You can hear Fantasize This, the Fantasize This podcast with Copes and Marcus talking fantasy football coming up top of the hour. But joining us on the UMA guest line, and, of course, that was Brock Purdy coming back. Purdy this year, Purdy is 14-1 right now to win the MVP. Christian McCaffrey 50-1. With us on the UMA guest line to break it all down and talk a little 49ers is Jordan Elliott. I think one of the better football guys you're going to catch in the media here in Northern California. He's a digital producer for NBC Sports Bay Area. And he's been on the Krug Show many, many times, and he's with us on KMBR to talk Niners and Jets. Jordan, thanks for a few minutes. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, Larry. Thank you for having me.
Well, you know, I pay you that compliment. I really do love your football breakdowns and some of the content that you've put out over the last couple of years. I know you do a role with NBC Sports Bay Area where you're working on the Warriors and the Giants and the Niners. But man, how much do you enjoy, doing some of the football breakdowns and going out to the combine and really rolling up your sleeves and on the personnel side of things?
Oh, I love it. I love all sports, and I'm blessed to be in a role where I'm able to cover all of our local teams here. I think there's something different about football when football season rolls around. You can kind of feel it in the air. And I think we've been very lucky these last few years to see a team that's, among the best, if not the best roster in the NFL right now. And they're still within striking distance of getting that Lombardi that's, eluded the franchise for going on 30 years now. So I'm really excited for the season. I think the Niners are in a great spot, and I'm looking forward to breaking it down with you.
Yeah, what do you expect to see Monday night? The Jets roll in. They had a great defense a year ago. Hassan Reddick, it sounds like, is going to report, but he's not going to play Monday night. How do you see Niners offense that's really only been together for a couple practices this summer going up against a pretty good Jets defense that's good on all three levels?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. They have playmakers all over. Obviously, everybody focuses on Sauce Gardner because I think he can make a claim as the number one corner in the league right now, a perennial All-Pro since he's entered the league, just fantastic player. Obviously, former 49er DJ Reed's in that secondary as well. But that front four is really, really talented, and I think something that gets overlooked. Quinnen Williams is the guy that's going to be the household name, but they added Javon Kinlaw. Michael Clemens took a huge leap forward last year. Jermaine Johnson, a former first-round pick from a couple years ago out of Florida State, is another really talented edge rusher. Then McDonald there as well. So I think we're going to see a really tough challenge right away for a 49ers offensive line that hasn't had an entire camp together. And I think that will be more of a test rather than the rhythm between Purdy and the skill position players. I think the scheme's going to alleviate some of the pressure there, and they'll get some open looks and allow them to rhythm. But those guys in the trenches are just getting thrown out there, and I don't think they're going to have the benefit of kind of easing back into things. So I'll be really interested to see who wins that battle up front on those first couple drives.
I'm eager to see if the Niners offensively can handle the Jets' pressure. I mean, Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald, I think it's going to be an awful big test for McKivitz and Trent. Quinnen Williams and Javon are huge-bodied guys inside. I think Brandel's going to have a hard time anchoring against Kinlaw. What do you think, though, as far as Robert Saleh? Do you anticipate that he's going to try to blitz Brock Purdy? Brock Purdy, New York blitzed the fewest times in the NFL last year. I mean, they blitzed 98 times on the year, but when they did blitz, they got home. Shanahan's teams have struggled with, Baltimore and Kansas City last year with some of the sim pressures. What do you think we're going to see up front from the Jets D line?
It seemed like when Saleh was here, he sparingly did blitz, and when he did, it was very tactful and, something that was probably game planned in rather than a feel thing during the game. I think that changed a bit when D'Amico Ryans was the defensive coordinator. I think he was a little bit more willing to kind of feel things out as the game went on. So I'm sure they have a couple pressures that they've baked into their game plan, depending on how the game goes. I don't know that that's the best avenue of success, though. I know Kansas City and Baltimore had some success with that, but I also think that the skill level of those defenses played a much bigger role rather than the scheme itself in those situations. Not that the Jets defense is very balanced as well, but we've also seen the flip side of it. That Thursday night game against the Jets, Wink Martindale is known for his affinity for blitzing, and they blitzed, it felt like, the entire game, and Purdy lit him up. And I think that he's a guy where he doesn't get fazed by that pressure, and he's a guy that is able to stay calm, throw hot, know where his check down is. And when you have the skill position players the 49ers do, you aren't afraid of checking down to a Kittle in the flat or throwing to McCaffrey, swinging it out wide in the backfield in those situations. So if they do go that route, I actually think it would be much more detrimental than just playing that more additional cover 3 shell, rushing 4, dropping 7 that Saleh did when he was here, because I think the Jets have the pieces on defense to really make a team have to drive the full length of the field that way methodically. And that's a much more difficult path to scoring rather than just piling up a bunch of pressures and hoping that they get home.
Why do you think Shanahan has not used J.P. Mason more to this point? I know they had Mitchell, and obviously McCaffrey's a MVP, and that might be the answer right there. But, man, J.P. Mason is a load. He's 240 pounds. The guy runs incredibly well. Here comes the Jets. They allowed 4.1 yards per carry last year, which is not a great number. They missed 117 tackles last year, which is a lot. I think that was top 10 in the league. I expect the Niners to run the ball a lot. Is there a reason you think? Is Mason not doing something that Shanahan needs to see? Or is it just, wait your turn, if Bobby T's the gatekeeper, and unless Bobby T loves you, you don't get on the field?
I think it's honestly as simple as just like what you said. They had guys in the front that are really hard to supplant. McCaffrey, it speaks for itself. He's the best running back in football right now. He's one of the most dynamic talents we've seen at the position, given what he's able to do as a receiver, the pressure he puts on defenses. And then when you look at Mitchell, I think the thing that gets lost in the fold with Mitchell is how dependable he is. He has never fumbled in a game during his NFL career. And I think that the ball security is so valuable to Shanahan. He's also been a very productive runner as well. He's been very efficient. But I think that trust, knowing that the guy is not going to cough up the football, is something for Shanahan that goes an extremely long way. And, we saw Mason work into the mix a little bit towards the end of games, closing out games, especially when teams knew they were going to run the ball. I think they relied on having him be that more big physical back to really kind of put the exclamation mark on some wins. But everything we saw in camp, I was really impressed. I'm not sure about you. And I know McCaffrey had mentioned early on in camp that they noticed right away that Mason, always had the talent, but he was starting to really put it together where every single day the consistency was building. And I think that's something that just comes with time and with reps. So now going into this season, I think he's at a level where he's extremely confident, and he's had those reps where he's been the guy throughout camp when McCaffrey had that injury where he missed the majority of it. And I think that's going to bode very well for him going forward, where it looks like he's primed for this not only number 2 role, but kind of a feature role where you can spell McCaffrey a little bit after that extremely heavy workload he had last season. Because if you're planning on in deep January, you need to have these guys stay fresh. And I think that Mason gives them the opportunity where it's not going to be a 50-50 timeshare, but I wouldn't be surprised to see kind of like a 70-30 split when we're looking at rushing attempts at the end of the season.
Here's the big question, I think, for Shanahan. One of the big questions coming into this game. What do you do with George Kittle? Now, you look at Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald and the struggles of Colton McKivitz and 2 practices from Trent Williams. And my first vote would be like, leave him in the block, right? Let him block. But then you look at the Jets and you look into some of those numbers from a year ago. They really struggled last year to defend the tight end. David Njoku from Cleveland late last year lit him up for 6 catches for 134 yards. So this is, to me, one of the key questions going into this game. How much do you need Kittle to block and help out McKivitz and Trent, as opposed to, do you want to get him out in the pattern and see if you can make the Jets cover the tight end? They struggle with the tight end.
Yeah, I'd be much more inclined letting Kittle get out there and run routes at a higher rate, and then you live with the results. I think the offensive line is going to be tested, but I think that they're more than capable of holding their own. And I think that there's some way to work in the quick game where they're not going to be back there blocking for 4 or 5 seconds consistently. And again, I don't think it's as easy as, scheming up routes and getting the skill position players in rhythm, but I do think there is a way to get the offensive line into rhythm, running the ball early, establishing the run so that you can then pivot to the play action, working in the quick game so that you're able to win some reps and get comfortable and throw off the timing of those very talented edge rushers and interior defensive linemen for the Jets. So I would be inclined to get Kittle out there, like you said, and really make that second level of the defense show that they're able to run with him, because I think that one thing that's really unfortunate is when you have as many talented skill position players as the 49ers do, I think that sometimes they overshadow one another because we get so hyper fixated on how talented one or two of them are. And I think Kittle is coming off one of the best seasons he's had as a pro, and it feels like it's kind of flown under the radar just because they have so many other talented players at their disposal. So I would get him out there running routes and see if the Jets are going to be able to stop him.
To me, one of the big questions in this game is, can the Niners stop Breece Hall, and can the Niners stop the screen pass in the short game? Every time I've watched the last year or two against the screen, even when they make the play, it looks like, well, if that guy didn't make the play, that could have gone for 35 yards. Or, hey, they made the play on this play, but man, if that guy doesn't trip him up, this guy could have gotten 30, 40, there's big plays out there. There's too much space. It seems like on the field on these screen passes, it seemed like an area where the Niners really were good a few years ago under D'Amico, under Saleh, not as much under Wilkes. I'm really eager to see what they look like against the screens under Sorensen, because I think they're going to get a bevy of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, from everything we've heard, it seems like the transition with Sorensen as the defensive coordinator and then Brandon Staley also being there to offer suggestions, kind of incorporate a little bit of his philosophy coming from the Vic Fangio tree into the scheme that they're implementing this season. It sounds like the players are really confident that the adjustments that they've made throughout the course of the offseason and some of the things they took away from the playoff games, even the playoff games that they won last season, some of the things they took away from where they could have gotten better, it seems like they're really confident that they've made the necessary adjustments to adequately fix those and address those. So I'm really interested to see that as well, because I think if you go back and you watch the Green Bay game, you watch the Detroit game, there were definitely some moments there where it was uncharacteristic of the defense that we've grown accustomed to, where they've been this perennial top 3, top 5 unit for going on 5 seasons. And I think that they're going to look much closer to that week 1, where we're like, okay, this Niners defense still is the class of the league and still a team that needs to be feared and respected by opposing offenses.
Hey, Jordan Elliott with us from NBC Sports Bay Area, their digital producer on the Uma guest line, as we talk a little bit Niners and Jets on 49er Forecast. A couple last ones before we let you go. One of the interesting things I saw on Inside the NFL this week is they said that the league average throughout the preseason was to only play the starters 10% of the snaps. There were several teams in the league that played their starters between 5 and 6% of the snaps. They say the Atlanta Falcons only played their starters 3% of the snaps. You think this is a trend that we're going to see more of? Is this teams just saying, you know what, the players, is this about product of the players making more money and teams more concerned about the ability to replace players that they lose? It seems like teams were very cautious with their starters this summer.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting discussion to have, because I do think there still is extreme value in the preseason, because I think it really is critical to figure out those roster cuts on the back end, guys on the bubble. Like there's a considerable portion of an NFL roster that's going to get sorted out based on the performance of preseason games, based on the film you get in preseason games. And I do think there is some value for starters to get in rhythm a little bit. Like if you sit your starters all preseason and then the team plays poorly week 1, that's the immediate talking point, is like, oh, well, they're rusty because they never played in the preseason. And then on the flip side of that, if you do get your starters out there and one happens to get hurt during the preseason, then you catch criticism because you played a starter in a meaningless game. So I think that ultimately it's going to come down to, if the NFL ultimately gets the 18-game schedule that seems like has been the goal for a long time, I think they'll cut it down to 2 preseason games. And I think we'll get to a point where you might start seeing like starters play a half of maybe the second one, and then the rest will kind of be to sort out the roster bubble guys, the fringe guys that are kind of, really struggling to make a case to stay on the roster and need those game reps to kind of put on film to make that case. But I also could see the flip side of it where it's not worth the risk to run your starters out there and play, more than a couple series just to kind of get in rhythm and kind of get that callus built for the season. I know during the Saints game, Brock Purdy was in a couple compromising positions that had 49ers fans holding their breath, and it looked like he was taking some hits that you wouldn't want to see your franchise quarterback take in any game, but especially a game where the end result doesn't matter in the standings. But after the game, Purdy immediately said, like, no, like, I wanted to be out there. Like, this is what I need to get in rhythm and to be prepared for when, the action really starts week one. Like, this is going to put me in the best position. So I do think it will be an interesting talking point, because I do think there are more players than just Purdy that feel that way. But ultimately, these teams have to weigh the risk reward. So I do think it will be kind of tapered down as the years go on, especially if we see another regular season game added.
Man, we always love chopping it up with you, man. We'll do it again soon. What's your pick Monday night? What do you think? Is it Niners going 1-0? I mean, this is a huge game for Robert Saleh, because I think they're on the road next week against the Titans. They get the Patriots in week 3. Heck, if they get off to a slow start, Robert Saleh might not make it to October.
I think that it's going to be close early, but I think the Niners comfortably go ahead in the second half, and they get out of there with a pretty comfortable win.
Great stuff, man. Always enjoy watching you and listening to your stuff and having you on the YouTube channel. Great stuff. We'll do it again soon. Thanks again, Larry. Anytime. Jordan Elliott, digital producer for NBC Sports Bay Area, stopping by, and we really appreciate him. Brock Purdy keeps it going Monday night. I'm really eager to see what Brock Purdy does this year. I mean, you think of what Brock Purdy did last year, where he had a 113 passer rating, leading the NFL, set the single season franchise record, passer rating of 100 or more in 10 games last year, second most in the NFL. So Brock Purdy, has seemingly, taken this franchise and lifted it all by himself. And now, he's coming into his first full off season. What does it look like? I'm really eager to see his improvement this year. All right, we're going to take a timeout. We're going to come back with more. We're going to go through some of the awards for the year and talk a little bit more about the matchup as we get you ready. 49ers Forecast, the first edition of it on the Sports Leader.